They didn't speak much. They didn't beg to be seen. They walked those polished halls with hoodies up, eyes forward, silence held like a blade. Amani and Ayana Walker weren't looking for a fight, but Lancaster Prep was the kind of place that didn't need fists to draw blood, just whispers, exclusion, and the quiet cruelty of kids raised to believe they owned the world. From the moment they stepped through those gates, they were labeled, judged, targeted, not because they broke rules, but because they didn't fit the mold. Too quiet, too composed, too black. And Brock Hamilton, the golden boy with a last name on the building, made it his personal mission to remind them every single day that they didn't belong. But Brock didn't know their story. He didn't know the man who raised them, didn't know what discipline forged in silence looks like, didn't know what happens when you push dignity too far. Because sometimes the most dangerous kids in school aren't the loud ones. They're the ones who never needed to prove anything at all. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Lancaster Prep didn't look like a battlefield. It looked like a brochure. Marble floors, crown molding, banners with Latin phrases that even the teachers didn't bother translating anymore. The kind of school where last names mattered more than GPAs, and where your future was already printed on a business card if your daddy's firm had enough stock options. That Monday, as sunlight spilled through the stained glass skylight of the main rotunda, two shadows stepped in, identical in posture, identical in silence. Amani and Ayana Walker. They moved like reflections of each other, both in black hoodies, sleeves pulled low, faces calm but unreadable, each step careful, measured. Not slow, just deliberate. The hallway stilled for a moment, like the school itself was holding its breath. Amani felt it before she saw it. The weight of eyes, the kind of stares that weren't curious, the kind that carried decisions already made. Ayana's hand briefly brushed her sister's wrist. Just once, the smallest gesture, no words needed. They were used to this. Did you see them? Voices, hushed but sharp. New kids. Nah. Did you see the hoodies? Who wears hoodies here? They didn't look around, didn't respond, because that's what their father had taught them. Never give them what they're looking for. It had been 3 weeks since the Walkers left Atlanta. Their mother got a job offer she couldn't turn down. Private security consulting for a firm that catered to international diplomats. Good money, clean neighborhood, better schools, or so they were told. But Lancaster Prep wasn't just better. It was curated, manufactured, controlled. Students didn't just carry backpacks, they carried legacy, names like Chandler, Ashcroft, and Hamilton weren't just surnames. They were social currency. And Amani and Ayana, they were outsiders, black girls in black hoodies walking into a place built by generations that had never once imagined someone like them in its hallways unless they were mopping the floors. Ayana walked a step behind her sister, not because she was unsure, but because she always watched the angles, always noticed the shifts in energy, and right now, it was shifting hard. Near the trophy case, 3 boys leaned against the wall like they were posing for a magazine shoot, all crisp collars, varsity jackets, and over-practiced smirks. The one in the middle stepped forward, blonde hair, navy blazer, name stitched in cursive on the breast pocket. Brock Hamilton. Morning, he said, voice casual but too loud. The kind of loud that begged for an audience. Didn't know the school started letting in. Duplicates. A few laughs behind him. Nothing hysterical. Just enough. Enough to be noticed. Amani didn't stop walking. Neither did Ayana. They moved right past him. Not flinching. Not blinking. And that silence. That bothered him. Oh, okay. Brock called after them, chuckling. Too good to talk or just waiting for a command. Like matching dogs, Ayana's jaw clenched just barely. Amani's hand slid into her hoodie pocket. Keep walking. just like they practiced. They made it to their homeroom without incident. No one said a word to them, not a real one, just a sea of glances, whispers, and that strange tension that builds when you're not wanted, but too strong to be ignored. Ms. Trenton, the homeroom teacher, didn't even look up when they walked in, just pointed at two empty seats in the back without breaking her stride on attendance. Walker and Walker got it. The seats were next to the window. Amani took the one closest to the glass. Ayana dropped her backpack gently on the chair beside her. They didn't take off their hoodies. The girl in front of them, platinum blonde, lip gloss too shiny for 8 a.m., turned around slowly. Her name tag sparkled with little rhinestones. So, which one of you is, which Ayana raised an eyebrow. Amani didn't answer. Oh my God, the girl said, laughing. You're not even going to talk. Are you mute or just moody? Another voice chimed in from the other row. Maybe it's a twin telepathy thing. Like, they don't need to talk to us. Another laugh. More eyes. Ayana leaned forward just slightly. Maybe we just don't talk to noise. The other girl blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed. Amani smiled. Just a little. Outside, the bell rang. The day had just started, but the storm had already begun. Second period, world history. The classroom smelled like leather-bound books and entitlement, the kind of room where every desk was carved from real wood, and the windows reached higher than most kids could jump. Amani sat at the far left corner. Ayana beside her, still hoodies up, still quiet. Mr. Langford, the teacher, was tall, pale, with salt and pepper hair, and the kind of voice that made everything sound like a museum tour. He didn't call roll, he didn't smile, he just began with, "Today, we discuss colonization." A ripple of shifting bodies. Some kids yawned, others already had their laptops open. Brock. He leaned back in his seat, arms crossed behind his head like he was bored with the past and already owned the future. As Mr. Langford paced slowly in front of the class, he started writing dates on the board: 1492, 1607, 1776. Imani's eyes flicked to the numbers. Her mind sharpened, not at the facts, she already knew those, but at the patterns. History wasn't just a list of events to her. It was a cycle. Ayana, meanwhile, scanned the room. She saw how two girls in the front whispered behind their hands, how one boy 3 rows up turned in his seat just enough to glance their way, then scribble something on a notebook and pass it to his friend. The friend laughed, loud enough to make Ayana's spine stiffen. Amani noticed too, but said nothing, because saying something here meant you became the problem, and they weren't going to give them that. Not yet. Mr. Langford continued. Colonial powers often believed their dominance was justified by cultural superiority. He paused, looked over the class. Any thoughts on what that means today? No one answered. He scanned again, then settled his eyes, of course, on Amani. You, in the hoodie? Thoughts? The room turned, every head, every eye. Amani lifted her gaze, calm and steady. It means people still walk into rooms they don't own, she said slowly, and act like they do. Langford blinked. Someone let out a soft, ooh, from the back, but Amani didn't smirk, didn't flinch. She just went back to looking at the board. Langford cleared his throat. Interesting perspective. He turned away, but the temperature had shifted. Brock sat forward in his seat now, elbows on his desk, watching. By lunch, the whispers had grown teeth. She's got an attitude. They think they're smarter than everyone. Just wait. They'll get sent back to wherever they came from. It didn't matter that the Walkers were from Atlanta. Didn't matter that they made straight A's. Didn't matter that their hoodies weren't a statement, just armor. At Lancaster Prep, silence wasn't golden. It was dangerous. In the cafeteria, Ayana spotted their usual table. The one they quietly claimed near the back windows already taken. Brock and two of his friends were there, eating, laughing. Imani stopped walking. Ayana whispered, "Want me to say something?" Imani shook her head. "That's what they want." So they turned, found an empty table near the trash bins, sat down, opened their packed lunches, carrot sticks, chicken wraps, water bottles, from across the room. Brock raised a carton of chocolate milk like a toast, grinned. Ayana didn't look up, but her hand curled into a fist under the table. Dad would say she began. I know what he'd say, Amani muttered. They ate in silence. Halfway through lunch, a girl named Zoe, one of the few black students at Lancaster, walked by. She hesitated, then sat down across from them. "I like your hoodies," she said, voice soft. Amani glanced at her. "You don't have to sit here." Zoe shrugged. "I know." Ayana stared. "So why are you?" Zoe leaned in slightly. "Because I'm tired of pretending I don't see what this place is." A pause, then a small, silent nod passed between the three girls. Not a friendship yet, but something better. Recognition, connection. The bell rang. As they stood to leave, Brock's voice cut through the room. "Hey, twins!" They stopped. "You dropped something," he shouted, holding up a crumpled napkin. It wasn't theirs, but he threw it anyway, right at Ayana's shoes. Laughter scattered around them like coins tossed on cold stone. Ayana didn't move. Amani turned her head, slowly, looked Brock dead in the eye, and smiled. Not big, just enough. The kind of smile that said, "You have no idea who you're messing with." And then they walked away, hoodies up, back straight, because ghosts don't run, they haunt. Friday, lunch period. The cafeteria at Lancaster Prep buzzed like it always did. Laughter bouncing off marble floors, trays clattering, and phones glowing with stories no one dared say out loud. Amani and Ayana Walker sat near the back, not in the trash corner anymore. That spot had become a symbol, and symbols had power. After Zoe joined them earlier in the week, two more students followed, quiet ones, overlooked ones. Now, their table wasn't empty anymore. Still, they kept to themselves, still wore their hoodies, still walked like shadows, but with more purpose now. Across the room, Brock Hamilton watched, fork idle on his tray, elbow perched. To anyone else, it just looked like boredom, but to Ayana, it looked like calculation. Brock had been quiet all week, no outbursts, no confrontations. Just that smile, the one that never quite reached his eyes, the kind that meant something was building, and it came. As the girls finished lunch, the overhead speaker crackled. "Amani and Ayana Walker, please report to the front office." Heads turned. The room shifted, not loudly, not suddenly, but like a tide pulling back before the wave hits. The sisters exchanged a look. Ayana stood first. Amani followed. They left their trays, picked up their bags, and walked through the cafeteria like it was any other moment. But it wasn't. Not when the moment followed them. Phones came out. Whispers trailed behind them. Laughter echoed sharp, controlled. At the front office, the secretary barely looked up. "You can go back. Principal Evans is waiting." They stepped inside. Evans sat behind a desk that looked too big for the room. His tie was too tight, his face too calm. "Girls," he said, "sit down." They did. He slid a manila folder across the desk. "I need you to look at these screenshots and explain." Ayana opened the folder, stared. Amani leaned over to look. The papers were printed from a social media account. Posts supposedly made by Ayana, angry rants. Threats. A blurry picture of a student locker with the caption, "Tick, tick, boom." It wasn't real. None of it. "This isn't us," Ayana said immediately. "I know," Evans replied, but his tone didn't sound convinced. Just careful. It came from an anonymous tip. We're investigating. But in the meantime, we're asking you not to return to the lunchroom for the rest of the week." A pause. Amani's jaw tightened. "You mean—" "Hide," she asked. Evans folded his hands. "I mean de-escalate. We don't want attention becoming disruption." Ayana leaned forward. "Principal Evans, someone faked those posts. I understand." "No, you don't," she cut in, her voice cold steel now. "We walked into this school quietly. We followed every rule. But it seems like silence isn't protection anymore." Evans didn't answer, just nodded, as if he was late to a meeting he couldn't get out of. They left the office. No apology, no investigation mentioned, just silence. Again. But outside, something waited. And it came at 12:43 p.m. They were halfway back to class when Zoe came running down the hallway. "Don't go to the cafeteria," she said, breathless. Don't. Why? Zoe held up her phone. It was a video, already at 2,000 views, posted just minutes ago. In the frame, Amani and Ayana's empty lunch table. Then the camera turned. Brock, standing on top of a chair, holding up a printed version of the fake post, shouting to the crowd, "This is who they really are. Watch out before they bring a bomb instead of a sandwich." The room erupted in laughter. Someone threw ketchup packets across the room. They landed in the empty seats the girls had just vacated. Someone else shouted, "Boom!" More laughter. Someone filmed it. Someone uploaded it. And now the whole school had it. Ayana stared at the screen. Amani didn't blink. "Okay," she said quietly. Zoe's eyes welled. "You shouldn't go back in there." "We're not," Amani said. "Not like this." She turned to her sister. Ayana's eyes were glass, not from tears, but fury. "You good?" Amani asked. Ayana nodded once. They turned back toward the main hallway, but not toward class, toward the exit. They didn't run, didn't speak, just walked. Out the front doors, past the flagpole, past the security office, into the sharp afternoon sunlight that felt suddenly warmer than the entire school had in weeks. They walked straight home, and when they got there, they didn't cry. They didn't scream. They opened the door and found their father sitting at the table, polishing his boots. He looked up, saw their faces, and without a word, he stood, because silence was over. The front door shut behind them with a dull thud. Amani and Ayana stood in the narrow hallway of their home. The kind of quiet that didn't come from peace but pressure pressing in from every direction. Their father, Marcus Walker, looked up from the kitchen table. His military boots sat beside a half-folded newspaper. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. One glance at his daughter's the slumped shoulders, the tight lips, the faint trace of red in Ayana's eyes told him more than any explanation could. Ayana dropped her backpack. Amani leaned against the wall, staring at the floor. Marcus rose slowly, his movements always deliberate, like the air bent around him before he moved through it. "What happened?" he asked, voice deep but steady. Amani was the first to speak. "They made a video." Marcus didn't interrupt. Ayana continued, "They said we were dangerous, made fake posts, had the whole cafeteria laughing like we were terrorists." His jaw flexed. "Just once. The principal gave us a cool-down suspension, told us not to go back to the lunchroom for the rest of the week, called it precautionary." Marcus nodded once, taking it in, processing, like a soldier watching enemy movement from a distance. He walked to the sink, poured 2 glasses of water, set them down in front of his daughters. Then he sat, elbows on the table, fingers laced. "You have 2 choices," he said quietly. "You can react, or you can respond." Amani looked up. "Aren't those the same?" "No," he said. "Reaction is emotion. Response is strategy." Ayana's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the glass. We didn't even say anything. Dad, she said, barely above a whisper, we didn't fight. We didn't yell. We just tried to exist. I know, he replied, a long pause. Then he stood again. Follow me. They moved through the hallway and into the garage. The walls were lined with neatly stacked storage bins, camping gear, and a punching bag in the corner worn, faded, wrapped in duct tape at the seams. Marcus walked to a covered shelf, pulled down a pair of wooden practice swords. He handed one to each of them. Amani stared at hers. Seriously, Marcus met her eyes. You want the world to listen to you? Show them the sound of your control. He stepped onto the mat, motioned for them to join. They hadn't trained in weeks, not since the move, not since Lancaster, but their bodies remembered. Stances shifted, breathing slowed, feet adjusted. They began. Thrust, block, strike, reset. Faster, cleaner, tighter. The rhythm was familiar, a language spoken not with words, but with muscle memory, with every step and pivot. They shed the cafeteria whispers, the hallway stares, the fake screenshots. And when Ayana struck forward a little too hard, catching Amani's wrist, she didn't apologize. Amani didn't flinch, because pain was a teacher. Too, Marcus stepped in, stopping them. He looked them both in the eye. You don't need to fight them where they're strongest. He said, fight them where they're blind. Amani tilted her head. What do you mean, people like Brock? They only understand control, popularity, perception. So when you don't need their validation, when you move outside their system, you become unpredictable. Ayana exhaled slowly. Then what's the move? Marcus walked over to a dusty black duffel bag on the shelf, unzipped it, pulled out two folded uniforms, black, crisp, embroidered with the golden phoenix logo of their old martial arts school in Atlanta. He tossed one to each of them. You have a tournament next weekend, he said. Ayana blinked. We haven't competed in a year. Exactly, he replied. Time to remind yourselves who you are. Amani clutched the uniform in both hands. It felt heavier than it used to, not with fear, with meaning. You think this'll fix what they said about us, she asked. Marcus paused. No, he said plainly, but it will remind you that their lies don't define you. And when people see who you are not through their filters, but through your truth, the lies will start to lose power. That night, they trained in the garage until their arms ached, until sweat soaked through their hoodies, until their silence felt less like a shield and more like a sword. And the next morning, they walked into school not trying to disappear. Same hoodies, same pace, same silence. But this time, it wasn't a retreat, it was a response. And Brock, he noticed, because when he made another joke about the twins bringing karate to the cafeteria, they didn't even look at him. Didn't need to. They just walked past. And in that moment, he saw something that rattled him more than anger ever could. Unbothered purpose. The hallway didn't look different. The lockers still gleamed like someone waxed them every morning. The scent of cinnamon rolls from the cafeteria still drifted through the vents like a broken promise. But for Brock Hamilton, everything felt off. He leaned against the stairwell rail between second and third period, surrounded by the same crowd that always followed him, Jake, Milo, and Devin, three shadows who laughed when he laughed, and whispered when he smirked, but now they were glancing at their phones more than usual. Now they weren't laughing quite as loud. Brock narrowed his eyes as he saw Amani and Ayana walking down the main hall. Same black hoodies, same straight posture, but something was different. It wasn't that they were louder. They still didn't talk to anyone, still sat at the edge of every classroom, like they were watching a game no one else could see. What had changed was how everyone else looked at them. Not pity, not mockery, curiosity, respect, even, and that pissed Brock off. Why are they walking around like nothing happened? He muttered. Milo shrugged. Maybe because it didn't. Brock snapped his head toward him. Excuse me. Milo raised his hands. Just saying. That video didn't really stick. Principal never said anything to anyone. Some kids even think it was fake. Of course it was fake. Brock barked. That's the point. Jake cut in. Yo, but did you see that clip of them training? Brock turned. What clip? Jake pulled out his phone, pulled up a grainy video on a student's story. There they were, Amani and Ayana in their garage, dressed in matching black martial arts uniforms, moving in unison, precision, focus, hands and feet cutting through the air like they were slicing silence into pieces. The caption read, "They don't talk. They train. Maybe y'all should stop playing with them." Brock's jaw clenched. They posted this. Jake shook his head. Nah, some kid from their old school shared it. Got reshared like 20 times already. Everybody saying they're like black belts or something. Brock looked away. He could feel it. That slipping sensation, like the crowd wasn't fully behind him anymore. Like the smirk he wore every day was starting to look more like a mask. And he didn't like that. Not one bit. He watched Amani open her locker down the hall. Ayana was next to her, flipping through her notebook. They didn't look over, didn't acknowledge him, didn't fear him. That silence used to feel like a win. Now it felt like a wall he couldn't climb. So he did what people like Brock do when the power starts to shift. He escalated. He waited until gym class. Coach was out sick, and the substitute was the kind who just tossed out a few balls and told the kids to stay active. Brock tossed a basketball to Jake, then grabbed a dodgeball. His eyes locked on Ayana, standing near the bleachers, tying her sneaker. He took 3 steps forward and launched the ball hard. It smacked the ground inches from her feet, bounced up, and hit her in the leg. Not enough to bruise, just enough to send a message. Heads turned. Ayana looked up, met his eyes, then slowly straightened, tying the last knot in her shoe. No words, no anger. She walked off the court, sat down, and sipped her water. The class fell silent. Brock chuckled. My bad. Slipped. No one laughed. Even Jake looked unsure now. After class, in the locker room, Milo muttered, Bro, what are you doing? Brock's voice sharpened. What do you mean this ain't funny anymore? You're making it worse. Brock shoved his locker door closed with a bang. They think they're better than us. Or maybe they're just not playing your game. Milo replied. That night, Brock went home and sat in front of his laptop. He scrolled through student stories, more reposts of the training clip, one from Zoe that said, Power doesn't always raise its voice. He slammed the laptop shut, then pulled out his phone, opened a private group chat, Real Lancaster, typed, They want attention. Let's give it to them. Time to remind people who runs this school. No one replied. But the typing dots appeared, and that was enough. It began with a whisper, not a shout, not a confrontation, just one of those. Did you hear? Moments that travel faster than fire in a dry forest. By Monday morning, the whispers had shape, names, details, screenshots. Only none of it was true. Ayana said in English class, her notebook open but untouched. She wasn't writing. She was listening. 2 rows behind her, a girl leaned over to her friend and muttered, I heard one of them snapped in middle school, broke a kid's arm. The friend gasped, half shocked, half excited. Which one, I don't know. The quiet one. I think they covered it up. Ayana's jaw tightened, but she didn't turn around. Instead, she pulled out her phone under the desk, opened her messages. Amani had already texted her, They're spreading something. 3 different people looked at me like I had a criminal record. Stay cool, Ayana typed back. Don't let them see us sweat. Upstairs. In the library, Brock was playing Puppet Master. He sat at the far table with his laptop open, earbuds in, like any other studious senior. Only he wasn't working on homework. He was creating an anonymous Google Doc, a fake disciplinary report. dressed up to look like an internal school memo. It listed A. Walker under a red banner marked behavioral risk student, cited undocumented physical altercations from a fake incident at a previous school, added quotes from concerned parents about aggression and hostile behavior. Then, at the bottom, confidential, not to be shared without administrative clearance. The irony made him smirk. He saved it as a PDF, sent it to a burner email, then used the school Wi-Fi to leak it onto a Reddit thread popular with Lancaster students. He even screenshotted the doc to send to group chats later with captions like, "Is this why they're so quiet? Tell me this isn't real." Welp explains a lot. It didn't take long. By lunch, Zoe had seen it, so had two teachers. One of them, Mr. Calhoun, flagged it to Principal Evans. Evans pulled it up, frowning. "This doesn't look like one of our forms." His secretary tilted her head. "But it has the district footer." Evans sighed. "So do most of the fake ones we've seen during prank week. Still, it was enough to plant doubt." That afternoon, during ethics club, which the twins had just joined, two juniors whispered as Ayana walked in, "She's the one." Right, the fighter. Both of them. It's like a thing. My cousin said their dad trains them like they're in a cult. Ayana sat down slowly, folded her hands across the table. Amani didn't speak either, but their eyes met, and what passed between them wasn't panic. It was resolve. After the meeting, they walked out together, side by side, matching pace. "I think it's Brock," Amani said. Ayana didn't hesitate. "Of course it is. We need proof." Amani added. Ayana glanced at her. "Or we need a mirror. Let him show everyone who he really is." But it was already starting. That evening, their mom got a call from the school. Not a formal complaint, not even a concern, just a check-in, a counselor claiming to want to make sure the girls are adjusting well. But the undertone was there, the suspicion, the just in case something happens. When she hung up, their mother stared at the phone, then turned to Marcus. "You said this would happen." Marcus nodded once. "I did." And now he leaned back, arms crossed. Now they decide who they want to be in the storm. That night, Amani pulled out her old journal. She turned to a blank page, wrote 3 words in all caps. They, fear, quiet, then underlined it twice. Ayana, meanwhile, opened her laptop, started combing through her social feeds, gathering every version of the rumor tracking who posted what, at what time. She wasn't just reading, she was mapping, plotting, and when she found the first repost that linked back to Brock's old burner email, a name he once used in a school meme war last year, she smiled, a soft, dangerous smile. Across the room, Amani looked up. "You find something?" Ayana nodded. "Yeah, I found our opening." Tuesday came with rain, not a heavy downpour, just that annoying mist that stuck to your hoodie and made the air feel heavier than it should. Amani and Ayana walked into Lancaster Prep without saying a word to each other. They didn't need to. The silence between them was fluent, a language of glances, half steps, and breath. Their plan was simple. Keep walking, keep observing, let Brock play his hand. And he would, because boys like Brock always do. By 5th period, the tension in the school felt different. It wasn't just the weather, it was the looks, longer stares, whispers that didn't even try to hide anymore. And when lunch came, the cafeteria was humming before they even walked in. Phones were out. Some kids had their cameras already pointed at the entrance. Amani felt the shift in her stomach. Ayana, 2 steps behind, slowed down just slightly. They pushed open the doors. The room quieted, then burst. "Hey, twins." Brock's voice rang out from atop the lunch table near the center of the room. He stood like he owned the place, like he'd rehearsed this in the mirror 10 times before school started. Ayana froze. Amani kept walking. A few gasps, a few laughs. Brock held up a large printed poster, full color, laminated. On it, a screenshot of the fake disciplinary file he'd made. Under it, a caption written in permanent marker, "Terror Twins, martial artists or future felons." The room broke into scattered laughter, but it was unsure, like everyone knew this had gone too far, but couldn't look away. Ayana's face flushed, but she didn't blink. Amani reached the center aisle, stopped, and looked up at Brock. Still silent, still calm. That made it worse. Brock wasn't getting the reaction he wanted, so he stepped it up. "Y'all think you're tough," he shouted. "Heard your dad trains you in the backyard like y'all in a Netflix prison camp." A few claps, nervous giggles. Ayana stepped forward now, standing beside her sister. "You gonna fight me right here," Brock taunted. "Come on, let's see the black belts. Or are y'all only strong when no one's looking?" A hush fell. For a moment, it felt like something terrible was about to happen, like a spark had dropped into gasoline. But Amani didn't move. She just looked around the room. Saw every phone pointed their way. Then back at Brock. "You done?" she asked. Calm. Even. It was the first time she had spoken in the cafeteria. Brock faltered just for a second. "Excuse me?" Amani took a step closer, her voice still soft, but firm. "I asked if you were done." Brock's smirk cracked. Ayana pulled out her phone, opened her camera app, flipped it, pressed record. "You want a show," she said. "Let's give you one." She lifted her phone and turned the lens toward Brock. Now everyone watched. And not the way he wanted. He tried to speak. "Turn that off. You didn't ask when you recorded us last week," Ayana said. Murmurs grew. Zoe stepped forward from the side of the room. "So that was you?" she asked. Loud enough to carry. Brock's eyes darted. "I don't know what you're talking about." Amani raised her phone now, too, the air thick with attention. Ayana spoke, her voice projecting over the cafeteria like a microphone had found her. "Someone's been spreading lies, faking files, planting rumors." She turned the camera to herself. "We're not ashamed, not scared. We see you." And now she turned the camera back to Brock. "So does everyone else." The room shifted, phones lowered. Some students stopped recording. Others started whispering. Brock stepped off the table, fast, too fast. Jake and Milo didn't follow him. He walked quickly toward the exit, but Ayana's final words followed him out. "Power's real funny," she said, "when it gets caught looking scared." Then she shut her phone off. Amani exhaled. Ayana nodded, and they turned, sat down at the same table Brock had tried to turn into a stage. Lunch continued, but the tone had changed. The laughter was gone, because humiliation is a strange thing. It cuts deepest not when you scream, but when you stay calm and let the crowd do the math. By Wednesday morning, the hallways of Lancaster Prep didn't sound the same. The lockers still slammed, the announcements still droned, but the tone, the energy was off, because something had shifted. The day after Brock's cafeteria stunt, the school was buzzing, not with admiration, not with loyalty, with discomfort. Students talked, but not around Brock. They laughed, but not with him. He walked through the West Wing like he always did, head high, blazer crisp, trying to keep up the illusion. But no one stopped to chat. No one gave him the usual fist bump. Even Milo, the last to peel away, stayed silent at his side until third period. They stood outside history class. Leaning against the lockers, Brock scrolled through his phone, muttering curses under his breath. "Can you believe this?" he hissed, shoving the screen in Milo's direction. "Someone posted that cafeteria clip on TikTok, got like 60,000 views overnight." Milo barely glanced at it. "Yeah, I saw." Brock waited for something else, a reaction, a joke, loyalty, but Milo just stared down the hall, then finally said, "You kind of made it worse." Man, Brock scoffed, I was defending the school's reputation. No, Milo said quietly, you were defending your own ego. And then he walked away. No anger, just truth. And truth had weight. Back in class. Ayana sat near the window, writing in her notebook. She could feel the air changing. Two, this time, the glances that came her way didn't feel sharp. They didn't slice through her like before. They felt curious, cautious, even respectful. Amani noticed it as well. In chemistry, a girl who hadn't spoken to her in 3 weeks leaned over and asked for help balancing an equation. A small moment, but significant. It wasn't about the problem. It was about seeing her. For the first time, someone looked at her like she belonged in the room, and it rattled Amani more than she expected. After school, they sat beneath the old elm tree behind the gym. It was their unofficial safe zone out of view. Away from cameras, Amani stared at her shoes. You think we won? Ayana peeled open her water bottle. No. Amani looked over. Then what was that? Ayana sipped. A crack. A pause. Crack in what Amani asked. Ayana's voice was soft but sure. The lie. They both sat in silence for a moment. The kind that settles like fog over quiet victories. Then Ayana pulled out her phone again, scrolled to the cafeteria video. She watched herself hold the camera steady, her voice echoing through the lunchroom. It didn't feel like her. It felt like someone she used to wish she could be, and maybe someone she was becoming, across campus. Brock sat in the principal's office, not because he'd been called in, because he asked to be. Principal Evans sat with a pen in hand, glancing over a printed letter from a parent. It wasn't about the twins. It was about the climate. Too much tension, too much noise, too much embarrassment. I want to clarify a few things, Brock said, voice clipped. Evans looked up. About that video, I didn't approve it being posted, and I think it's being taken out of context. Evans raised an eyebrow. Interesting, because context is exactly what's missing in a lot of the rumors floating around this school. Brock's mouth opened, then closed. Evans leaned forward. We're launching a review, not just of what happened yesterday, but everything. The rumors, the screenshots, even the so-called disciplinary file. You mean the fake one, Brock said too quickly. Evans's eyes narrowed. I didn't say fake, but good to know you're familiar with it. The silence in the room turned heavy, and for the first time since 6th grade, Brock didn't feel in control. He felt seen, and not in a good way. That evening, Amani and Ayana sat at the kitchen table with their parents. Their mom served dinner in quiet movements. Their father, Marcus, flipped through a stack of articles on his tablet. At the end of the meal, he looked at his daughters. You stood your ground, he said, but this isn't the end. Ayana nodded. We know. You shook the system. He continued. Now it's going to shake back. Amani asked, how do we stay ready? Marcus reached for his old worn notebook, the one he used when training new recruits back in his military days. He slid it across the table. By learning how systems work, he said, so you can break them without ever raising your voice. Ayana opened the first page. It was blank. Amani smiled. Guess we're writing the new rules now. Thursday morning came with clouds. Not the kind that brought rain, the kind that just hung low. Like the sky couldn't make up its mind. It matched the mood inside Lancaster Prep perfectly for Amani and Ayana. The day started like most hoodies up, heads down, bags light but minds heavy. But this time, there was a difference. Now the school was watching them, and not just students, teachers, second period English. Mr. Halberd, the kind of teacher who always claimed to love debate, called on Amani during their discussion on ethical storytelling. What do you think about using fiction to reveal truths, he asked, tapping his pen on the edge of his desk. Amani looked up slowly. She could tell from the way he phrased it. This wasn't about literature. It was about her, the video, the cafeteria, the narrative. She kept her voice calm. I think fiction's powerful, but the danger comes when people confuse fiction with permission. Halbert squinted. Permission for what to rewrite the truth. She said, until it protects the wrong people. A silence fell. No one snickered. No one clapped. But something landed. After class, Mr. Halbert didn't speak to her, but he did watch her pack her bag with a longer look than usual, one filled not with curiosity, but caution. And that's how the next layer of tension settled over the school. Not violence, not confrontation, institutional discomfort. By third period, the whispers weren't just about Brock anymore. They were about the walkers, about whether they were causing division, whether they were bringing outside drama into a school that prided itself on being above all that. In the staff lounge, two teachers sipped coffee. I just think they're intimidating the other students now. One said, or maybe they're being heard for the first time. The other replied. Principal Evans stood down the hall, staring through the glass as the two girls walked past his office. He knew something had shifted. He also knew Brock Hamilton's family had called the night before requesting a formal review of all materials associated with the Walker twins. Formal review. That meant paperwork. That meant pressure. That meant politics. At lunch, Ayana noticed it first. The flyer. Taped to the corner of the student council bulletin board. Emergency assembly, digital behavior, school safety, and student conduct. She tore it down and held it up for Amani to see. Tomorrow, she said, third period. Amani read it twice, then folded it neatly. He's trying something. Yeah, Ayana nodded. He's trying to flip the script. Later that day, Zoe pulled them aside by the water fountain. You heard what it's about, right? She asked, eyes darting. Ayana nodded. Brock's calling it a student-led safety forum. Says it's about healing the school climate. Healing, Amani echoed. He lit the match. Zoe shook her head. Word is, he's got his mom pulling strings, board connections. They're trying to make you all the center of it. Ayana's jaw tightened. Turn us into the threat. Zoe hesitated. There's more? She said, I got a message from a friend on the yearbook committee. Apparently Brock submitted an anonymous piece for the student voice section. Amani raised an eyebrow. And it's called The Danger of Silence. Ayana let out a short breath. Not a laugh. Not a sigh. Something between, Amani muttered. He wants to reframe it. Make it look like he's the one who was bullied. Yeah, Zoe said. And some people are starting to buy it. They all stood there for a long moment, staring at the walls of their school, so polished, so proud, so perfectly prepared to defend itself at the first sign of discomfort. Amani finally said what none of them wanted to admit. If he controls the room tomorrow, he wins. Ayana nodded. So we take the room back. That night. They worked quietly at the kitchen table. No tears, no panic, just strategy. Their dad sat nearby, watching, not helping, just present. He knew this part wasn't his. This was theirs. Ayana typed. Amani edited. They weren't going to fight with fists. Not tomorrow. They were going to do something Lancaster Prep didn't expect. They were going to speak, and not just as two black girls in hoodies, but as students who knew exactly who they were and weren't afraid to say it out loud. Third period. The gymnasium lights buzzed overhead like nervous energy. Students filed in slowly, guided by staff who wore smiles too tight and clipboards held like shields. Folded chairs lined the polished wood floor. A microphone stood center stage, perfectly placed between two tall blue curtains draped with the school crest. The banner above read, Lancaster Prep Student Assembly Building a Safer, Stronger Community. But Amani and Ayana already knew this wasn't about community. This was about control. Brock Hamilton stood near the stage in a blazer 2 shades darker than his father's campaign photos. His smile was polished, practiced, and hollow. From the bleachers, students buzzed in low voices. I heard it's about that fight. Wait, which twins they're? Like, dangerous or something. Ayana sat near the back, her hoodie pulled slightly down, Amani next to her. Legs crossed, arms folded tight. Neither one looked nervous, because they weren't surprised. Principal Evans stepped onto the stage first, cleared his throat, adjusted his tie. Good morning, everyone. Today's assembly was organized by members of our student leadership team, who felt it was important to reflect on how we treat one another, especially in digital spaces. He nodded toward Brock. And now, I'd like to invite up a student who's taken initiative in starting this conversation. Brock Hamilton. Scattered applause. Brock stepped up with the ease of someone who had never once been told no. He took the mic like it belonged to him. Thanks, Principal Evans, he said, and thank you all for being here today. His voice oozed sincerity, like syrup over poison. I think we can all agree it's been a tense couple weeks at Lancaster. A lot of hurt, a lot of confusion, some of it, maybe, even fear. He paused, letting the word hang. Ayana felt it ripple through the crowd. And then Brock did exactly what they feared he would. He weaponized the truth. Now, I won't name names, he continued, because this isn't about calling anyone out. But when students bring outside conflicts into school spaces, when they use silence or intimidation to gain influence, it affects all of us. A low murmur. Students shifted. Some nodded. Some looked down. Amani's fist clenched. But she didn't move. Brock went on. We should feel safe here. We should feel heard. And when others use fear, when they avoid accountability by turning attention on their critics, we have to ask, what kind of culture are we building? Ayana's chest rose, slow and sharp. She recognized the tactic. Guilt by implication, no names, but all fingers pointed. Then he dropped the final line. We can't let silence become a threat. He stepped back. Applause. Too loud. Too forced. Principal Evans returned to the mic. Thank you, Brock. Powerful words. He turned to the crowd. If anyone else would like to offer a perspective, the floor is open. For a moment, the room held its breath. And then, Amani stood, not rushed, not loud. She just rose to her feet. All heads turned. Ayana rose beside her. Together. They walked down the side aisle. A few teachers looked confused. Principal Evans stepped forward. Ladies, this isn't Amani, met his eyes. You said the floor was open. He hesitated, then stepped aside. She took the mic. Ayana stood behind her. The room quieted. All cameras up now. Amani began. My name is Amani Walker. My sister is Ayana. We wear hoodies. We don't talk much. And for the past 3 weeks, people have been trying to decide what that means. A pause. Ayana's voice followed. We've been called dangerous, intimidating, silent threats. Amani picked back up. But silence isn't a threat. It's survival. She scanned the room. Some of us learned early that speaking up can get you labeled, that not reacting is the only way to stay safe. Ayana added, we didn't come here to fight. We came to learn, just like you. The room was still, phones still recording. Brock shifted near the stage, eyes narrow. Amani raised her voice slightly. But when people twist your silence into suspicion when they make up files, fake stories, weaponize your stillness, they're not building safety. They're building control. Ayana stepped forward. And control is not the same as community. Silence. Then, from the back clap, then another, then 5, then more. Scattered at first, then growing. A pulse of truth moving through the room. Brock stepped toward the mic. But Principal Evans held up a hand. Let it happen. Let them speak. And in that moment, the line Brock had carefully drawn between us and them broke, because now the room wasn't just looking at the twins, it was looking at him. And for once, he had nothing to say. After the assembly, the halls of Lancaster Prep didn't echo with gossip. They echoed with questions. Whispers followed Amani and Ayana, but they were a different kind now. Not sharp, not loaded with judgment, just uncertain. And uncertainty was dangerous for people like Brock, because his power had always relied on one thing being the default truth. But now people were thinking, now people were wondering, now people were remembering the fake post, the screenshot leak, the cafeteria spectacle, the way Brock always seemed to be at the center of everything ugly, but never named. Amani and Ayana didn't stay to bask in the attention. They walked out of the gym the same way they'd walked in, quiet, hoodies up, backs straight. But something was different now. The silence around them wasn't cold. It was charged. That afternoon, in English class, Zoe passed Ayana a folded slip of paper. It wasn't dramatic, just discreet. Ayana opened it under the desk. You made people see. They can't unsee it now. She looked up. Zoe didn't smile, just nodded once. Across the room, Brock sat stiff in his chair, jaw clenched, fist on the desk. He hadn't looked at either of them all day, but his mind was racing. His phone buzzed with new notifications, comments on the assembly video, reposts of Amani's words, DMs he didn't want to open. One of them read, Yo, Brock. Maybe sit this one out for a while. Another Amani speech hit harder than any of your leadership. Chill. By the time the final bell rang, Brock was unraveling. He didn't go to lacrosse practice, didn't text back his usual crew. Instead, he went home, slammed the door to his room, and threw his backpack across the floor. He paced, opened his laptop, opened the folder he thought he'd never need again, labeled failsafe. Inside were 3 video files, clips he'd edited last week, planning to use if things got out of hand. One was a zoomed-in recording from gym class, Ayana, blocking a basketball mid-drill with an aggressive shove. Another was from the cafeteria, taken out of context, where Amani had stood too close to a group of boys laughing at her. He had edited subtitles underneath. They're not calm, they're calculating. He hadn't posted it yet, but now he was desperate. He clicked open Instagram, drafted a story post. Some of y'all need to stop idolizing what you don't understand. Not everything quiet is harmless. He hesitated, then added the clip. Uploaded. Within 10 minutes, it had 300 views. Within 30, over 1,000. But this time, the reaction didn't go the way it had in the past. Someone replied with, bro, you editing context again. Someone else posted a screenshot of the video file's timestamp, metadata proving it had been clipped and muted. Then a side-by-side with the real footage, then a new caption, Brock stays reaching, and for the first time, he lost the room. Not just a few kids, the whole narrative. That night, Ayana sat at the dining table, rereading the comments from students she didn't even know. Some just said, thank you. Some said, I used to be scared too. And one, from a freshman named Tori, simply said, I wore my hoodie up today. She showed Amani. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Across the house, their father watched from the doorway. He didn't interrupt. He just stood there, silent as ever, arms crossed, proud, but alert, because even victory draws fire. And sure enough, the call came, Friday morning, Principal Evans. He didn't sound angry. He sounded tired. There's been another complaint, he said to Amani and Ayana in his office. Someone submitted an official concern that your presence in the school is causing unrest. Ayana raised an eyebrow. Our presence, Evans, shifted uncomfortably. It was phrased carefully, but the implication was that your videos are stirring division. Amani leaned forward. Calm. So now truth is the problem, Evans didn't answer. but his eyes did. "I'm not taking action," he said quickly. "Just informing you. The board's reviewing recent events." He looked down, then added, almost in a whisper, "You should be careful." Ayana stood. So did Amani. "We've been careful." Ayana said, "That's the problem." And they walked out because a line had been crossed, not just by Brock, by the system, and next time they weren't walking in alone. Friday afternoon, the sky over Lancaster was the same dull gray it had been all week. Like even the weather was holding its breath. Inside the administrative wing of Lancaster Prep, the tension wasn't just in the air, it was on the walls. Behind every closed office door, behind every carefully worded email, behind every sideways glance exchanged in the teacher's lounge, the school wasn't reacting to the truth, it was reacting to the threat of exposure and the walkers. They were now a liability in the eyes of people who liked their racism, quiet, their students obedient, and their rules bent but never broken. It started with a phone call. Ayana was in art class when her name came over the loudspeaker. Amani was pulled from physics at the same time. They met outside the front office, both expressionless. "We're being summoned again," Amani murmured. Ayana nodded. "Surprise. Surprise." Inside, Principal Evans waited with two unfamiliar faces, one in a navy suit, the other with a clipboard and an exhausted smile that said she worked for a district, not a school. "Mrs. Walker, Mrs. Walker," the suited man greeted. "Thanks for coming." They didn't reply. Evans cleared his throat. "There's been another complaint." The woman stepped in, from a parent whose Ayana asked flatly. "We're not at liberty to say," she replied, "but it's serious enough that we're required to open an official review." Amani crossed her arms. "A review of what?" "Exactly," the man in the suit tapped his tablet. "Several students allege that you've created a hostile environment. There's a claim you threatened another student physically, and that your social media posts are inciting division." Ayana scoffed. "That's rich." Evans looked deeply uncomfortable. "It's not a suspension," he added quickly. "Just a precaution." "You mean we're being silenced?" Amani said, her voice low. Again, no one responded, because they all knew the truth. This wasn't about safety. This was about control. That night, the twins sat at the kitchen table. Again, but this time, they weren't planning. They were deciding. "I say we go public," Ayana said, tapping her phone. Amani didn't answer right away. "What if they twist it again?" she finally said. "What if it backfires?" Ayana looked up. "I'd rather be punished for telling the truth than swallowed by their silence." Their father stepped in then, from the hallway, not looming, not commanding, just present. "I'm proud of you both," Marcus said, "but if you choose to go loud, you need to go prepared." He dropped a thick folder on the table. "Documentation." He said, "Screenshots, names, timestamps. You've been playing chess. Now it's time to show them the board." Saturday morning, Amani uploaded the video. She sat in front of her bedroom window, sunlight catching half her face. No filters, no music, just truth. "We go to Lancaster Prep. We wear hoodies. We speak softly. And for that, we've been called threats." She detailed the fake files, the edited clips, the assembly, but the worst part, she said, isn't what one student did. It's what the school let him do again and again. She paused, staring into the lens. If you've ever been made small in a place that claims to protect you, you're not alone. She posted it with the caption, "Hoodie But." Human Ayana posted hers 10 minutes later. They didn't tag the school. They didn't mention Brock. They didn't have to. The internet did the rest. By noon, the hashtag was trending in their county. By evening, students from other schools were stitching the video with their own stories. By Sunday, Local reporters started calling, and Brock, he was drowning. He posted a notes app, apology vague, deflective. He turned off comments after the first hour, Monday morning. The Walkers weren't at school. They were at the district office, with their parents, with an attorney, and with evidence. Principal Evans was called in for questioning. So were two teachers. So was Brock. That night, the school sent out a campus-wide message due to recent events. Lancaster Prep is partnering with an outside equity consultant to review internal practices and student conduct policies. We remain committed to the safety and dignity of all students. But it didn't mention names. It never does. The next morning, Amani and Ayana walked through the school gates again. Same hoodies, same silence. But now everyone made space. Tuesday morning, the air outside Lancaster Prep was still, almost too still. The flag over the front gate barely moved, and the early autumn leaves clung to the trees like they knew something was coming, and something was, or rather someone. At 7:58 a.m., the front doors of the school swung open, and Marcus Walker walked in. He didn't rush, didn't look around, didn't wear a suit, just dark jeans, worn boots, a plain gray t-shirt under a faded army green jacket, no badge, no briefcase, just presence and silence that demanded respect. The security officer at the front desk straightened up like someone had just walked in wearing stripes and stars. "Sir? Can I help you?" Marcus's eyes didn't flinch. "I'm here to speak to Principal Evans." He said, "My daughters were nearly expelled for existing in hoodies. We're going to talk about that." His voice wasn't raised, but the weight in it, unmistakable. "Yes, sir, I'll call his office." The guard stammered. Marcus nodded once and walked toward the seating area. Boots thudding softly against the polished tile. Every secretary in the main office peeked up from their desks. None of them said a word. In room 103, Principal Evans was halfway through a spreadsheet when the phone rang. The moment he heard the name Marcus Walker, his hand tightened around the mouse. 5 minutes later, they were sitting across from each other. Evans tried to smile. "Mr. Walker, thank you for coming. I didn't come for a thank you," Marcus said, voice flat. "I came for accountability." Evans cleared his throat. "Of course, we're reviewing all allegations, and the district has begun its formal inquiry. Let's talk about that," Marcus said, folding his hands on the desk. "You had weeks of warning signs, rumors, forged evidence, manipulated media, and you waited until the fire went public to find a hose." Evans fumbled. "We didn't have confirmed proof at the time. You didn't look for it." Marcus cut in. "You saw two black girls, quiet, capable, and you let that scare you into neutrality." Evans blinked. With all due respect, Marcus leaned forward slightly. "When a system watches a child get pushed and chooses to stay seated, it's not neutral, it's complicit." Silence settled. Evans shifted in his chair. "We've scheduled a community forum for next week. We want to give your daughter space to speak." Marcus nodded. "Once. They will speak," he said, "but not for your optics, for their truth." He stood, and after that, "I'll be speaking too, not as a father, but as a former federal advisor on institutional accountability." Evans paled slightly. "Wait, federal advisor," Marcus nodded. 12 years of national threat assessment, 8 years in behavioral risk strategy. I know what danger looks like." He walked to the door, paused, "And my daughters," he added without turning back. "They were never the threat. They were the mirror. You just didn't like what you saw." Then he left. No mic drop, no raised voice, just impact. Outside the office, Ayana and Amani waited by the lockers. They hadn't been told their dad was coming, but when they saw him walking down the hallway, both of them stood a little straighter. He didn't say anything, just nodded to them. Ayana asked, "How'd it go?" Marcus shrugged slightly. "I asked some questions they've been avoiding. Amani smirked. Let me guess. No real answers. Not yet, he said, but they know we're not walking in shadows anymore. That afternoon, word spread fast. Mr. Walker had come to school, the quiet father, the mystery man, and he hadn't come to yell. He came to dismantle. By evening, the school board chair called the Walkers directly to formally apologize for the lack of early intervention. Marcus listened politely, then said, "Apology accepted, but we're not done." He wasn't bluffing. Because that night, he opened a new file on his computer, Lancaster Accountability Initiative. It had a list of names, dates, screenshots, witness statements, and a header that read, "If the system refuses to self-correct, we correct the system." Meanwhile, Amani posted a single line to her story, no photo, no explanation, just text. He never needed to raise his voice. He was the voice. It got shared 400 times in 2 hours because power doesn't always look like a badge or a podium. Sometimes it looks like a black father walking calmly through the front door of a place that never thought he'd show up and reminding them that silence is a choice, but justice is a promise. Wednesday morning arrived with emails, not from teachers, not from parents, from journalists, from education advocates, from civil rights organizations who'd seen the Walker sisters' videos and then started looking deeper into Lancaster Prep. It didn't take long. The silence the school had once depended on was now crumbling under the weight of the outside world pressing in. And at the center of the movement was a man who never asked to be the center of anything. Marcus Walker. He sat in his living room, laptop open, 3 tabs running at once, one for correspondence with a former colleague at the Department of Education, one for a draft proposal titled Equity Audit Lancaster District Accountability, and one for the calendar invite to a community-led town hall. His daughters walked in quietly, half dressed for school. "You working again?" Ayana asked. Marcus didn't look up. "Always." Amani leaned over his shoulder. "You're building a task force." He nodded. "We've got 3 lawyers, 2 education consultants, and a mother from the district next door whose son was suspended for wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt. She's very organized." Ayana smirked. "So you're basically launching a campaign." Marcus finally looked up, his eyes calm. "I'm doing what schools only do when it's their reputation on the line. I'm creating pressure." He closed the laptop softly. "And pressure," he said, "doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be real." Meanwhile, at Lancaster Prep, the walls were closing in on Brock Hamilton. He could feel it in every hallway, every side glance, every hushed whisper that didn't stop when he walked by. By third period, it wasn't just awkward silence, it was avoidance. His friend Milo no longer waited for him at lunch. Jake had stopped responding to texts altogether. And when Brock passed Zoe in the science wing, she didn't flinch or look away. She just looked him dead in the eye and said, "It's catching up to you." He didn't reply. Couldn't, because she was right. That night, Brock sat in his room, staring at the screen of his phone. The post from the Walker sisters had now crossed 200 views. A civil rights nonprofit had reposted it, calling Lancaster a case study in coded bias, and someone from the student newspaper had emailed him requesting a quote for their upcoming article titled Reputation and Reality, Who Gets Protected at Lancaster Prep. He slammed his laptop shut, stormed out of his room, found his father in the kitchen sipping scotch. "I need help," Brock said, voice sharp. "They're ruining me." His father, Gregory Hamilton, looked over the rim of his glass. "Who the Walkers?" "That dad. They're making a scene." Gregory sighed. "You made the mess. Now sit in it." Brock blinked. "What I warned you." Gregory said, "I told you not to poke the system too hard. We fund that system. We don't fight it." Brock's voice cracked. "You're not going to help me." Gregory sipped again. You already got the chance to disappear this. You chose to double down, and now you're no longer an asset. The words hit harder than any headline. Brock stood frozen, chest heaving. His father didn't look up again, just muttered, "Clean it up or stay out of my name." Back at the Walker's house, the mood was different. Not triumphant, not boastful, just grounded. Ayana and Amani sat at the dinner table while their mother plated up roasted chicken and greens. Marcus scrolled through his phone and read aloud. District has confirmed a third-party review will begin Friday. Full transparency measures. Community observers allowed? Their mom smiled, tired but proud. We forced their hand. No, Marcus corrected gently. Our daughters did. He looked at them both. You shook the tree. We're just catching what falls. Ayana leaned back, arms crossed. Feels like it's not over. Marcus nodded. It's not, Amani added. Then we don't relax. Not yet. Later that night, Ayana drafted a post. It wasn't for claps or retweets. It was for clarity. She wrote, "Power isn't loud. Power walks in, says nothing, and makes the room shift. Our father taught us that. So we're walking forward now, together." She tagged it, "Silent Power." The next morning, she woke up to a message request from a teacher, Mr. Lennox. It read, "I've watched quietly too long. I'd like to help. I'm ready to speak." Thursday morning arrived like a hell breath. The kind of day where the air hums with tension. You can't name, you just feel it. At Lancaster Prep, something had changed. Not all at once, not loud, but unmistakable. The silence had shifted sides. It began with a knock. Mr. Lennox stood outside Principal Evans' office, holding a folder tight to his chest. His sleeves were rolled, his jaw set. He was the kind of teacher who knew when to stay out of things, but now, staying out meant staying guilty. Evans looked up as he entered. "Paul," he said, surprised. "Everything all right, mister?" Lennox sat down without being asked. "I've got something to say." Evans leaned forward, cautious. "Go on." Lennox opened the folder. Inside were copies of student statements, screenshots from group chats, and a personal letter signed by 11 faculty members supporting the Walker twins and demanding a full internal audit of student conduct oversight. Evans scanned the pages. "This is a call for transparency," Lennox said, "and decency." Evans looked up. "You coordinated this?" "No," Lennox replied. "They did. I just finally decided to stop watching from the sidelines." By second period, word had spread teachers were taking a stand. Ms. Alvarez, the English teacher, taped a printed quote outside her door. "To remain neutral in times of injustice is to choose the side of the oppressor." Under it, she wrote in red ink, "Hoodie butt." Human students stopped to read it. Some snapped photos, others whispered, but no one laughed. In third period, Mr. Lennox handed out a discussion prompt titled, "The Power of Narrative Reclamation." Ayana looked down at the paper. Amani whispered, "He's with us now." Ayana didn't reply. She just smiled. Meanwhile, Brock Hamilton was unraveling. His locker had been defaced with a sticky note that read, "Legacy Immunity." Someone made a meme of his Notes app apology and posted it to the school's burner account with the caption, "When you try to gaslight 1,000 orange students and get ratioed by truth." It had over 300 likes in under an hour. At lunch, Brock sat alone. His phone buzzed nonstop, not with support, but with fallout. Even the student council chat had turned on him. One message simply read, "You embarrass this school, full stop." But what pushed him over wasn't what they said, it was what they ignored. He was invisible now, no longer feared, no longer admired, just irrelevant. And that terrified him more than any rumor ever could. So he made one last move. At 2:16 p.m., during 7th period, Brock stormed into the media lab. The room was empty except for two tech interns editing footage for the morning broadcast. He told them he needed the mic for a student response piece, said it was cleared by administration. They didn't question him because he still wore the name Hamilton. He recorded one take, just one, looked directly into the lens and said I was wronged. I was attacked. My family was targeted because we expected discipline and structure. The Walkers manipulated everyone. They divided the school. They used their silence as a weapon. He hit upload. The clip was live within minutes. But this wasn't the old Lancaster anymore. Within 20 minutes, the official school broadcast team issued a correction. Today's segment was not approved or vetted. The views expressed do not represent Lancaster Prep or its student body. 30 minutes after that, the Walker sisters posted their own video. Short, simple. Amani said, "We don't need to defend ourselves, because the truth is doing that for us." Ayana added, "And for those who think silence is a weapon, maybe ask yourself why you feel threatened by it." Then the screen cut to black. No hashtags, no music, just impact. That evening, the school board issued a formal statement acknowledging systemic lapses and announcing that Brock Hamilton was being suspended pending further review. The news made local media, and in the Hamilton home, Brock's father didn't say a word. He didn't scold him. He didn't defend him. He simply walked past him in the foyer like he didn't exist. In Brock, he sat on the edge of the staircase, phone in hand, notifications frozen, because for the first time in his life, there was no shield around his name, no one left to blame, and all he could hear was the echo of the silence he'd once mocked. Monday started with silence, but not the kind that isolates. This was the kind that followed truth heavy, humbling, and irreversible. Lancaster Prep's parking lot was quieter than usual. Even as students filed in through the front gates, there was no morning buzz, no clusters of gossip at the lockers, no smug laughter bouncing off the walls, because now everyone knew. Over the weekend, the district released a formal report, short, clinical, damning. After independent review, it has been concluded that student Brock Hamilton was responsible for falsifying and distributing defamatory content related to two other students. He has been placed on indefinite suspension. No spin, no polite language, just the truth. By noon, local news stations were running the headline "Elite Prep School Scandal Power, Privilege, and the Price of Silence." The twins hadn't returned to school yet. Not because they were hiding, but because Marcus Walker had insisted the district finish its internal proceedings first. He wasn't negotiating. He was protecting his daughters from the last gasp of a broken institution trying to save face. Meanwhile, inside the school, the culture was cracking. In English, Mrs. Alvarez scrapped her original lesson plan and put one sentence on the board. "What does accountability look like when it's overdue?" No one raised their hand for the first full minute. Then Zoe spoke. "It looks like people who never had to explain themselves finally having to." A few students nodded. In the back, Milo added quietly, "It looks like Brock's table being empty." Across campus, students wore hoodies not for protest, but solidarity. Some black, some gray. Some with printed quotes from Amani and Ayana's posts. By lunch, the cafeteria felt more like a community center than a battlefield. People shared tables who had never spoken before. Someone left a handwritten note on the Walker's old seat. "You were right to speak. Sorry we didn't listen sooner." Mr. Lennox read it on his way past and smiled. Just faintly, because change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sits quietly, exactly where harm once happened. Across town, Brock Hamilton sat in his family study, the curtains drawn, his phone buzzed occasionally, mostly with silence. No more group chats, no more likes, just unread DMs and a father who refused to speak to him. His mother had arranged a private meeting with a school board representative, trying to soften the blow, but nothing could soften what was coming next. The board had voted Brock's name would be removed from the nomination list for Student Leadership Legacy Award. The very plaque his older brother had won, the one already engraved, and waiting would stay in the glass case. Blank. That afternoon, Amani and Ayana walked through their front gate, not to school, to a recording studio. An alum from Lancaster, now a producer for a popular teen podcast, had reached out. She'd seen the videos, read the transcript of the assembly speech. She wanted to give them a mic, a real one, inside the studio. The walls were padded and dim. Amani ran her fingers along the foam. Ayana sat quietly, staring at the recording light. "You ready?" the producer asked. Amani looked at her sister. Ayana nodded. "Let's speak." The interview wasn't flashy. There were no scripts, just their story. From the day they walked into Lancaster Prep quiet, in hoodies, hoping to belong to the first joke, the fake screenshots, the public trial disguised as an assembly. They didn't dramatize it. They didn't cry. They just told the truth. And when the producer asked, "What kept you from breaking down?" Ayana answered, "We were raised to know who we are before the world tries to decide it for us." Amani added, "And we learned that silence isn't surrender, it's strategy." The episode dropped that evening, titled simply "Hoodies in the Halls." Within hours, it hit trending charts on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thousands of teens across the country listened. Some commented, some wrote in, and some just sat with it. Because that's what stories like this do. They plant roots, and from there, they grow. At home, Marcus sat at the kitchen table listening to the final edit, his wife across from him, his daughters beside him. When it ended, the room was quiet, not because there was nothing to say, but because sometimes silence means everything has been said exactly right. By Wednesday morning, Lancaster Prep wasn't just a school, it was a story, a trending topic, a national headline, a mirror. The podcast episode Hoodies in the Halls had crossed 500,000 plays in under 48 hours. It wasn't just students sharing it now. It was educators, parents, activists. Even a state senator reposted a quote from Amani, "Silence isn't surrender, it's strategy." News vans appeared outside Lancaster's wrought iron gates by noon. Teachers entered the building with downcast eyes. Some smiled softly at the cameras. Others ducked behind tinted windows. Principal Evans issued a press statement that tried to sound proactive. Lancaster Prep is committed to reflection, accountability, and healing. We are grateful to the Walker family for their grace and strength, but it was too late for grace, because now the whole country was asking the same question. How did a school with so many resources fail two students with so much discipline? And for Brock Hamilton, the storm had only begun. That morning, his mother sat at the dining table clutching a mug of tea that had gone cold. Her phone buzzed, displaying a text from the board chair. "We're withdrawing Gregory's name from the foundation event. Too much heat." She put the phone down, didn't say a word. Brock stood in the doorway, eyes hollow. "They're canceling Dad." His mother looked up slowly. "No. Brock, you did." He stepped forward. "You think this is all my fault, I think," she said, her voice cracking. "We gave you everything except accountability." He flinched. "I didn't know it'd go this far." "You didn't care." She stood, walked out, the mug still full, the room too quiet. Across town, the Walkers were back in school, not as guests, not as victims, as students. Amani and Ayana walked through the front gates like nothing had happened, because they didn't need to act strong anymore. The front hallway had changed. Banners now hung near the main office, "Equity as a practice." Not a slogan, listening as leadership. A bulletin board featured quotes from the assembly. A photo of the twins stood in the center. They passed by without stopping. They didn't need to admire it. They lived it. In ethics class, a substitute teacher handed out a worksheet titled Responsibility in Systems of Power. Ayana blinked once. Amani chuckled under her breath. This unit should be familiar, she whispered. From across the room, Zoe raised her hand. I'd like to revise the question on number 3. It asks what we'd do if we saw someone being unfairly blamed. She paused. I already know what I do now. I'd speak up. I didn't before. And I won't make that mistake again. The room nodded. Even the substitute smiled, because what had started as a scandal had become a curriculum. After school, the girls waited by the flagpole for their ride. But instead of Marcus, a black SUV pulled up. The window rolled down. It was Devin Owens, producer of a youth-led political docu-series out of New York. He leaned out. I know this is last minute, but if you're willing to tell your story on camera, we'll fly you out tomorrow. Full segment. National reach. Ayana looked at Amani. Amani asked, why us? Devin smiled. Because you didn't just survive something. You rewrote the playbook. They didn't answer right away. Because this wasn't about fame. This was about meaning. That evening, the family sat around the kitchen table, the same one where strategy had been written, where silence had been planned, where pain had been processed. Now it held possibility. Marcus said, you don't owe the world a performance, but you do have the right to share the truth on your terms. Their mom added, and if that means flying across the country to teach people what silence and strength really look like, we'll be right there with you. Amani looked at her sister. Ayana nodded. Let's go. Meanwhile, in a much quieter room across town, Brock sat staring at a blank college application. He'd missed 2 early deadlines already. His former guidance counselor hadn't returned his last 3 emails. And the only notification on his phone was a reminder for therapy intake, court-mandated. The walls around him, once filled with trophies and polished wood panels, felt smaller now. The kind of small you can't escape from. The kind you built yourself. Thursday morning, the city skyline looked different. Maybe it was the altitude. Maybe it was the nerves. Maybe it was knowing that for the first time, they weren't just being watched by a school. They were being heard by a country. Amani and Ayana stood at the edge of the rooftop garden outside the Manhattan studio, headphones around their necks, clipboards in hand, and soft wind brushing against their hoodies, matching, still, but now symbolic. Across the terrace, producers buzzed around lights and camera rigs. Technicians tested audio levels. A makeup artist asked, you want anything for shine? Amani smiled. We've lived in fluorescent schools for years. We shine just fine. The producer laughed. Fair enough. Inside, Devin Owens prepped final notes. The segment title was already locked, more than a hoodie. When students rewrite the story, the docu-series had profiled youth leaders, whistleblowers, and policy changers, but never sisters like these. Never a story that started with cafeteria whispers and ended with a national conversation. Back home, Lancaster Prep held its breath. Teachers streamed the feed onto smartboards. Parents who once complained about disruptions now quietly clicked share. Students who had stayed silent now whispered to each other, those are our girls. Even Principal Evans stood in the back of the staff lounge, arms crossed, jaw tight. He didn't speak. He listened. And Brock, he didn't watch. He couldn't. His phone buzzed with alerts anyway. Snippets of the broadcast, pull quotes, screenshots of the twins sitting side by side on the studio couch, posture composed, eyes steady, voices clear. We never asked for a stage. We asked for a desk. When they told us we were dangerous, what they meant was we didn't flinch. We didn't raise our voices. We raised the floor. It wasn't just a victory lap. It was a blueprint. They talked about discipline, about silence, about the weight of being read wrong by systems that claim to protect. They didn't name Brock. They didn't have to, because this wasn't about him anymore. This was about every kid who had ever been misjudged for being composed, for being quiet, for being black and unbothered. When the episode ended, the producer wiped his glasses. "I've never seen a room get that still," he said. Amani replied, "Stillness isn't absence. It's intention." Ayana nodded. "We were just waiting for them to listen." Back in Lancaster, the school board convened behind closed doors. The final votes were cast: a new equity review process, mandatory anti-bias training, a rewritten code of conduct focused on restorative justice, and the replacement of one administrator who had failed to respond appropriately during the early weeks of the incident. Evans survived barely, but his power didn't. He was no longer the gatekeeper. He was now the steward of a school that had been fundamentally changed by two girls in hoodies. That night, the Walkers returned home to a porch full of cards, not flowers, not gifts, letters, handwritten notes from students across the country, from teachers, from parents. One envelope, addressed to the quiet girls who spoke loudest, read, "My son was suspended last year for defending himself against racial bullying. He never got to tell his story, but because of you, he knows his silence was never weakness. Thank you." Marcus Walker stood on the porch with his daughters, sorting through envelopes as his wife held a cup of tea in both hands. No one said anything for a long time. Then Ayana finally whispered, "Are we really done?" Marcus shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "but you're no longer fighting to be heard. You're fighting to decide what you'll say next." Amani looked out over the quiet street, the air finally cool. "We started this as the shadows in the crowd," she murmured. Ayana added, "Now we're the light under the door." They didn't hug, didn't cry. They just stood there, still, unshaken, unbothered, unstoppable. 1 week later, Lancaster Prep had found its rhythm again. The hallways were no longer tight with tension, and the whispers that used to hang like threats had become curiosity, thought, even admiration. It wasn't that everything had been fixed, far from it, but something real had shifted. And at the center of it, still walking side by side like clockwork, were Amani and Ayana Walker, hoodies still on, backpacks slung low, heads high, no longer invisible, not because people finally approved of them, but because they no longer needed approval. That Tuesday morning, the twins stood in front of the library, waiting on the Student Advisory Council to arrive. Since the assembly fallout, Principal Evans, under pressure from the board, had agreed to launch a new student-led initiative focused on equity and digital accountability. And guess who had been asked to chair it? Amani had rolled her eyes at the email. Ayana had just smirked. Ironic. "Huh," Ayana said now, tapping her pen against a notebook. "They tried to write us out of the story. And now we're writing the syllabus." Amani finished. Riley jogged up, clipboard in hand. "You ready?" Amani shrugged. "Always." They walked into the library conference room together. 12 students sat in a circle of chairs. Some were familiar kids who'd once watched from a distance. Some were new, quiet, curious, unsure. But all of them were there because something inside them had moved, not just because of the injustice, but because they'd seen someone survive it. Amani cleared her throat. "This council isn't here to fix the school overnight," she said. "It's about learning how to see what we used to ignore." Ayana added, "We start with honesty, we lead with listening, and we don't wait for permission to speak truth." She pulled out a draft framework the twins had written over the weekend. Each student received one. Highlighters were passed around. Discussion began. No shouting. No debate club theatrics. Just clarity, just quiet that finally meant presence, not fear. Across campus, in room 208, Mrs. Alvarez started a new literature unit. She called it Narratives That Shift Culture. On the screen behind her, a quote glowed. To tell your own story in your own voice is the greatest act of resistance. She turned to the class. This week, I want you to write a personal narrative, not the one you think I want to hear, the one that matters to you. Students looked up, surprised. No rubric, no bullet points, just freedom. Pens started moving. Amani stared at her blank page, not because she didn't have anything to say, but because for the first time, her story didn't start with defense. It started with power. She wrote, "They feared my silence because it didn't ask for permission." She underlined it twice. In the cafeteria, the mood was different too. Students who used to ignore one another now sat shoulder to shoulder. A group of freshmen passed around a flyer for the new Digital Ethics and Leadership elective, the first of its kind, designed with help from Ayana and Amani. Even Jameer, the soft-spoken poetry kid who once ate lunch alone, had started a school zine called Third Period Ghosts, a tribute to those who stayed silent too long. He approached the twins after school. "I want you to submit something," he told Amani. "Anything. A sentence. A title. You write like you already know how it ends." Amani smiled. "Maybe it's not about how it ends." Jameer raised an eyebrow. "What then?" Ayana answered for her. "How it echoes." But the change wasn't just with the students. It was in the staff room. Teachers who once avoided hard conversations were now asking questions. Mr. Lennox led a professional development session titled "What We Don't Say Speaks Loudest." He used Brock's fake posts as a case study. He used Amani and Ayana's interviews as the counterbalance. And when a new teacher asked, "So what does real support look like?" Mr. Lennox didn't hesitate. "It looks like not waiting for a headline to believe your students." That Friday afternoon, as the school emptied, Ayana and Amani lingered by their lockers. A seventh-grade girl approached them slowly. Pink hoodie 2 sizes too big, books clutched like armor. "Hi," she said quietly. They turned. "I'm Ava. I used to eat lunch in the bathroom. I thought that was normal." Ayana crouched down to meet her eye. "It's not." Ava nodded, then blurted, "I watched your video with my sister. We didn't talk the whole ride home. But when we got out of the car, she said, 'I think I'm ready to tell Mom about the stuff that happened at her last school.'" Monty's eyes softened. "You helped her," Ava whispered. "You didn't even know her. But you did." Ayana smiled gently. "We know her now." That evening, in her journal, Amani wrote one line. This wasn't just about surviving the story, it was about rewriting the ending. She paused, then added in making sure no one has to do it alone again. By the next week, the name Lancaster Prep was no longer just a headline. It had become a blueprint. 3 other schools in the district announced their own student-led councils. One principal emailed the Walker's family directly, asking if Amani and Ayana would be open to leading a peer session at their middle school. "I'll pay you both," she added. "Your voices are worth it." Marcus replied with a simple message. "They're not looking for payment. They're looking for permanence." Meanwhile, the district website unveiled a new landing page titled Student Voices, front and center, a black and white photo of Amani and Ayana, mid-speech at the assembly, eyes forward, posture calm, power unmistakable. Below the photo, a quote from Ayana's podcast segment. "We weren't trying to lead, we were trying not to disappear." Teachers began referencing their story during lessons. Parents requested replays of the Assembly for Family Discussion Nights. Even the PTA invited Marcus Walker to speak at a town forum, not as a father, but as a strategist. The tide wasn't just turning, it was shifting the ground entirely. And yet, not everyone was ready to move forward. In a house 3 blocks from Lancaster's West Gate, Brock Hamilton sat in silence. The couch he once sprawled across now felt like a stage with no audience. His phone stayed on the charger all day. No calls, no texts, just reminders of what he'd lost. College recruiters had gone quiet. His father refused to discuss his future, and his name once a ticket into any room now only open conversations people were too polite to finish. He tried to write a statement, a new one that sounded more reflective, less defensive. It began with, "I realize now how much damage my actions caused." He deleted it, started again. "What I did was wrong," deleted again. Because the words weren't the problem. The belief had never been there. That afternoon, he walked past the old lacrosse field, empty now. The season had ended early. The new coach had benched half the team for social accountability violations. He stared at the bleachers, at the place where it all started, the whispers, the power plays, the performance of invincibility. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to Ayana's latest post. It read, "Change isn't what happens around you. It's what happens in you." He stared at it, typed one comment, just one word. "Sorry." He hovered over post, then locked the screen. He wasn't ready to be that honest. Not yet. Back at Lancaster, the twins were helping decorate the library for the district's first Youth Equity Summit. The keynote, a roundtable discussion with students from across the county. Ayana tapped a stack of name tags on the table. "I don't think I've ever seen so many schools working together on something that wasn't sports." Amani smiled. "Feels like a better kind of team." Behind them, Mrs. Alvarez taped up a poster with one of Amani's early lines. "They feared my silence because it didn't ask for permission. Your words are everywhere," she said, stepping back to admire it. "Must be surreal." "It is," Amani admitted, "but it's not just our words anymore. It's everyone's now." Ayana added, "We just lit the match. They brought the wood." Later that day, a girl named Layla, 8th grade, from a school 2 towns over, approached them nervously. "You don't know me," she said, twisting her bracelet, "but when I saw your video, I told my counselor about what was happening in my class. She moved me out the next day." The twins listened. "You made me feel like I wasn't crazy, like being quiet didn't mean I was wrong." Ayana looked her in the eyes. "You weren't crazy," Amani smiled. "You were just the only one paying attention." Layla blinked fast, nodded once, and walked away before she could cry. That night, Amani sat on her bedroom floor surrounded by old notebooks. She found the first one she used when they moved to Lancaster. Page 1 said, "Keep your head down. Don't make noise. Don't get noticed." She flipped to the last page, wrote, "Speak when it matters. Stand even when it's quiet. And never let them teach you to shrink." She closed it gently. Meanwhile, Brock stared at his own empty page and still had nothing to write. The auditorium was full, not just with students, but parents, teachers, counselors, the kinds of people who usually sat in the back of the room with their arms crossed, waiting for it to be over, but not today. Today, they leaned in. Rows of chairs filled the Lancaster Prep Gym, transformed into a forum for the district's first ever Youth Equity Summit. Banners lined the walls, bearing slogans that hadn't existed a month ago. "Listen first. Silence is not absence. Hoodies speak too." On stage, 2 stools sat under a single spotlight. Ayana and Amani stood just off to the side, holding index cards they didn't plan to read from. Behind the curtain, the coordinator whispered, "Take your time. It's your stage." Ayana looked at her sister. Amani exhaled. They walked out together. No music, no introduction, just the sound of feet on wood. The applause came slowly, not hesitant, but reverent, because everyone in that room had already heard about them. Now they would hear from them. Ayana took the mic first. She didn't smile for effect. She just spoke. "A few months ago, we walked into this school with our hoodies up and our heads down. We weren't trying to change anything. We were just trying not to disappear. But this place, this system, it didn't wait for us to act before it reacted. It called us threats before it learned our names. It judged us by what we didn't say, not what we stood for. And when it finally listened, it wasn't because we got louder, it was because we got braver. Then Amani stepped forward. Some people think silence is weakness, but silence when chosen is power. Our dad taught us that. He never raised his voice, but when he spoke, everyone leaned in. So we used our silence the same way, not to hide, to focus, to aim. And now we're not here to prove anything. We're here to invite you in, because this work, this change doesn't end with us. It starts wherever you choose to carry it. The room was completely still. Then the applause rose, steady, long. Some students stood, some adults wiped their eyes. The keynote hadn't just landed, it planted roots. After the event, Ayana and Amani were surrounded. Students from other districts, teachers from rural schools, even a superintendent who admitted, "I've been listening to the wrong voices for too long." But one moment stood apart. At the far edge of the gym, near the exit doors, stood Brock Hamilton, not in a blazer, not surrounded by teammates, just him, hands in his pockets, shoulders square, face blank except for something that looked an awful lot like regret. He didn't move at first, then slowly. He walked forward, no cameras, no crowd, just truth walking with heavy feet. He stopped 2 feet in front of them, cleared his throat, spoke low. "I didn't come here to be seen. I came because you deserve to say what I never let you. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I needed to say this, without anyone else watching." Ayana looked him in the eye. Amani crossed her arms. They didn't interrupt. He continued, "I thought being loud made me right, but you were the ones people remembered. You didn't just survive me. You outgrew me." He nodded once, almost like a bow, then turned to leave. Ayana called after him, "Brock." He stopped. She didn't say more, just looked at him. Long enough for him to understand that some things can't be undone, but they can be walked away from. He nodded again, this time slower, then walked out. That night, the Walker family sat on their porch under a quiet Virginia sky. The house was calm. The porch light buzzed. Marcus leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. Their mom sipped tea. Ayana rested her chin on her knees. Amani scrolled through emails on her phone. She read one aloud. "Dear Amani and Ayana, I'm 14. My teacher played your video in class. I didn't know I could speak until I saw you stand. Thank you," Ayana whispered. "That's the one." Amani looked up. "The one what? The one that means we did it right." Marcus opened one eye. "You girls didn't just do it right. You rewrote the rules." Monday morning, the air was crisp, the kind that clung to the edges of your hoodie but couldn't quite make you cold. The sky hung low with pale clouds, the way it sometimes does in the fall, like the world is preparing to turn a page. At exactly 7:53 Mem. Amani and Ayana Walker stepped off the bus and stood in front of Lancaster Prep. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. This time, their silence wasn't about hiding. It was about honor. The school had changed, but the building looked the same. Polished doors, ivy on the brick, students lingering near the gates. But now, when the twins walked in, the crowd parted with respect, not suspicion. No longer the ghosts in the crowd. Now, they were the pulse. Students nodded as they passed. Some smiled. Some just watched, curious and quiet. The same way people observe art that says something more than they can put into words. And all the while, the hoodies stayed up. Not defiant, just real. Their lockers hadn't changed. Same numbers, same dents in the corner. But someone had left a post-it note on Amani's. "Thank you for showing me how to stand before I knew how to speak. See, and on Ayana's, I used to think I had to be loud to matter. Now I know better." Amani peeled the note and tucked it inside her journal. Ayana simply pressed hers flat against the inside of her locker door, where it would stay. Their first period was government with Mr. Davis, the one who used to barely look their way, now he greeted them with a nod. And when class started, he said, "Today we're talking about First Amendment rights. I figured the most qualified people in the room could help us out." He looked at the twins. "Would either of you like to begin?" Amani smiled softly. "We already did." At lunch, they sat in their usual spot, no longer alone. Zoe joined them, as did Jameer, whose new zine, Third Period Ghosts, had just published its second issue. On the cover, a sketch of two hooded girls walking side by side, heads up, shadows cast long behind them. "This is based on y'all," he said, sliding it across the table. Ayana flipped through it. Page 2 featured a poem titled, "Stillness is Strategy." She paused. "Read the first line out loud." They asked if silence meant weakness. I asked if yelling ever stopped a blade. Amani looked around the table, at the students who now sat beside them, not because they wanted protection, because they'd found something real, something safe, something earned. That afternoon, Principal Evans passed them in the hallway. He didn't say much, just offered a quiet nod, then kept moving. Amani turned to Ayana. "Funny how much can change without him changing at all." Ayana shrugged. "We weren't waiting on him, and that was the truth. They never were." Later, Ayana stood by the library windows watching students gather for the after-school forum. The walls now carried posters of quotes from their speeches, but she wasn't looking at the walls. She was watching a seventh-grade boy standing alone, hoodie zipped to the top, backpack clutched with both hands. He looked unsure, out of place, familiar. She nudged Amani. "That was us," Ayana said. Amani walked over without a word, tapped the boy's shoulder. "You coming in?" she asked. He looked up, eyes wide. "I don't know if I should." "Then it's exactly where you belong," Ayana said. They let him in. The door closed behind them. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Marcus Walker stood out front waiting for his daughters. He didn't say anything when he saw them coming, just opened the car door and waited. When they got in, he looked at them in the rearview mirror. "Tough day," Ayana smirked. "Just Monday." Amani leaned back in her seat, "But a good one." He nodded, turned on the ignition. The radio played something soft, saxophone and slow drums. And as they pulled away from the curb, Ayana looked out the window, past the gates, past the banners, past the headlines. At the sidewalk where they first walked in, months ago, two quiet girls in black hoodies, wondering if the world would ever make space for them. Now they weren't wondering. They were walking. Friday afternoon. The gym was decorated with string lights and folded chairs. The banner above the stage read, "Voices that Changed Us," in hand-painted gold letters. This wasn't a prom, wasn't a pep rally, wasn't some last-minute PR stunt. This was a recognition ceremony requested by students, organized by faculty, and approved unanimously by the school board. But the Walkers hadn't asked for it. They didn't even know it was coming. Ayana and Amani walked in to find their classmates already seated, murmuring with anticipation. Zoe waved them over, grinning like someone who knew a secret. "What's going on?" Amani whispered. Zoe shrugged, not very convincingly. "You'll see." The microphone cracked. Ms. Alvarez stepped on stage. She wore her favorite red scarf and the look of someone proud beyond words. Today, she began, "We're not here to make a statement." She paused. "Let the room breathe. We're here to honor a story, one that was almost erased, one that challenged us, changed us, and reminded us that courage doesn't always shout." She turned, gesturing toward Ayana and Amani. "Sometimes it wears a hoodie and walks the halls with its head high." The room erupted in applause. Ayana blinked slowly, trying to absorb what was happening. Amani just stared ahead still, grounded, trying not to cry. "Mrs. Alvarez continued, "These two students didn't come here to lead. They came to survive, and in doing so, They became the reason 1,000 other students now believe in their own voice. She motioned toward the curtain. A group of students stepped out, freshmen, sophomores, even a middle schooler or two from the district's partner schools. Each of them wore a hoodie. Each of them held a note card. One by one, they stepped up to the mic. The first, a short boy with braces and a tremble in his voice. "My name's Devin. Before this year, I never spoke in class. Not once. But after Ayana's video, I volunteered for debate club, and I won regionals." Applause. The second, a girl with glasses and a backpack bigger than her torso. "I'm Tasha. I didn't think anyone would ever listen to what I wrote. Now I'm starting a creative writing circle. We call it Ghost Pens, because some of us were invisible till now." Another round of applause. On and on they came, voices small but steady, testifying not about perfection, but permission, permission to exist, to speak, to wear what made them feel strong, to walk through spaces that were never built for them, and stay. When the last student stepped down, Miss Alvarez returned to the mic. "And now," she said, voice breaking just slightly, "we'd like to present a final gift." She reached behind the podium, held up a framed photo, Ayana and Amani at the assembly podium, eyes calm, light pooling behind them like a crown neither of them asked for. Beneath the photo, the Silent Power Award for leadership without permission. The room stood. Everyone, not because they were told to, because they wanted to. Amani walked forward first. Slowly, Ayana followed, one step behind. They accepted the frame, looked out at the crowd, and for the first time, didn't feel like they were being watched. They felt seen, truly seen. "Ms. Alvarez whispered, You okay?" Ayana smiled. "Yeah," she said. "I think we're finally home." That evening, back at the house, Marcus grilled dinner on the back patio. The air smelled like charred garlic and fresh air. Their mom poured lemonade into mason jars. The twins sat on the porch swing, the award resting between them. "You think it matters?" Amani asked. "That thing we said, that they carry it forward?" Ayana nodded toward the award. "It already is." They sipped lemonade in silence. Then Ayana pulled out her phone, opened a message from Tasha, the girl from the mic. It read, "You didn't just make space. You built a path. I'm not scared to walk it anymore." Amani looked up at the sky, now streaked with orange. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the need to document it, just feel it. The next morning, as the school reopened for Saturday mentoring, a small group of younger students arrived early. Waiting for them near the entrance was a seventh grader, the same one Ayana had once welcomed inside the library, now taller, now confident. Hoodie zipped halfway down. He held the door open for the others. As they walked past, one of them asked, "Are you one of the Walker kids?" He smiled. "No," he said, "but they taught me how to walk like one." And with that, the Hoodie walked on Tuesday afternoon. The hallways of Lancaster Prep were quieter than usual, not empty, just settled, like the building had finally taken a deep breath and let it go. The semester was winding down. Students carried stacks of books instead of baggage. Laughter echoed in the breezeways without bitterness. No one stared when someone walked in wearing a hoodie anymore. Not even the staff. The culture had shifted, slowly, permanently. And that's what change really looked like, not fireworks. Fun in the Warmichin Foundation. Amani stood by her locker, slipping her last notebook into her bag. The corner of it was worn, a little frayed from months of being opened and closed and reopened again. It was the same notebook she'd first carried into Lancaster, the one where she'd written, "Keep your head down. Don't speak. Don't be a problem." Now, the final page said, "They will write you as a problem before they ever ask your name. So speak your name, stand in it. And if they stare, let them learn." She closed it, zipped her bag. Ayana walked up beside her, keys in hand. You ready? Amani looked around one last time. The banners were still on the wall. The mural was finished now, a massive portrait near the library entrance, students of all shades, all genders, all shapes, sitting side by side. In the center, two silhouettes in hoodies. Not a monument, a mirror. It went up for you, Monisha. I'm ready, Amani said. They didn't make a scene of it. No long hugs, no dramatic farewell. They just walked through the halls, out the front doors, across the same sidewalk they'd first stepped on months ago, the day the whispers started. Now there were no whispers, just footsteps, soft, certain, a rhythm. As they reached the curb, a voice called out behind them, "Wait, Tranintum, Siri, to Dartuborn." They turned, and it was Ava, the seventh grader, who once thanked them for helping her sister speak. She jogged up, breathless, holding something small. I, uh, she hesitated, then handed them a folded sheet of notebook paper. I wrote this. For lit class, they asked us who our favorite public figures were. I said you. Ayana smiled softly. You sure you want to waste your hero pick on us? Ava shook her head. Serious. You weren't just loud. You were steady. I needed that. She handed over the note and stepped back. Amani unfolded it. The handwriting was messy, but the words were weightless and clear. Some people walk in, so the door stays open for the rest of us. You didn't just walk in, you held it open. I'm not afraid to walk through anymore. Ayana folded it carefully and slid it into her jacket pocket. Keep going, she told Ava. I will walk for the mom. You and for you are to work for Dewa. That night, Amani sat on her bedroom floor, surrounded by the soft hum of a peaceful home. Her hoodie was draped over her chair. The lights dimmed. Her phone buzzed beside her, a final message from Mr. Lennox. School board voted tonight. Hoodie dress code rule officially revised. Language now reads, students may wear attire that reflects their comfort and identity, so long as it does not disrupt learning. I figured you'd want to know. You didn't just change a school. You changed the rules. She didn't reply right away. She read it again, then whispered, mostly to herself, we didn't change them. We reminded them who they were supposed to be. Ayana walked into the living room, holding a folder full of documents, college letters, invitation requests, 2 speaking engagements, a mentorship offer from a social justice institute. Marcus looked up from the couch. All that for 2 quiet girls in black hoodies. Huh? Ayana grinned. I guess silence isn't so invisible after all. Their mom joined them, sitting on the arm of the couch. You taught them that, but you also taught them something else. Amani stepped in. What's that? Their mom looked at both of them. That courage doesn't always raise a fist. Sometimes it just refuses to step back. On Sunday, the final issue of Third Period Ghost dropped. Jameer handed them each a copy at the community center. On the last page, a short poem appeared beneath a photo of the school entrance. No title, no billionaire, just lines that read, you don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to be seen to matter. You don't have to be anyone else. When you already are the story. And so the hoodie walked on. Through classrooms, through school boards, through poems and podcasts and policy meetings. But most of all, through students, the ones who once sat in the back, who spoke under their breath, who thought their silence made them small. Now they knew better. Because of 2 girls who didn't fight for the spotlight, they just refused to disappear. They never planned to be leaders. They weren't chasing applause. They weren't looking for revenge. Amani and Ayana Walker walked into Lancaster Prep, hoping for one thing, to be left alone in peace, but the world didn't give them that peace. So they found something greater, purpose, in a school that labeled them threats before learning their names. They chose not to shout. They chose to stand. They showed us that silence is not weakness. It is strategy. It is survival. And when wielded with intention, it becomes power. Their story didn't end in a viral video or a standing ovation. It ended in a hallway, a handwritten note, and the quiet confidence of every student who now walks through those school doors unafraid. Because now they know the hoodie isn't a threat. It's a symbol of presence, of protest, of quiet power that can't be erased. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone walks into a room with their hood up and their eyes steady, we won't look away. We'll lean in because the story isn't over. The hoodie walks on. If this story moved you, do one thing, share it, hit that like button, leave a comment, and tell us what part hit you the hardest. Subscribe for more stories that speak louder in silence than most do with a mic. This is Silent Power Stories, where every walk tells a truth. See you in the next story. And remember, keep your head high, your voice steady, and your hoodie on.